How's it going, everyone? My name is Jalen, and welcome back to another segment of Under the Radar. Well, today I'll be highlighting another five players in this 2026 NBA draft cycle. Without further ado, we'll kick it right on off. My first player being Robert McRae V from Florida State this year, and this is the guy that, surprise, surprise, also spent a couple times in the transfer portal, ultimately starting out at Wake Forest. He then takes a redshirt year, sophomore year would be, then transfers to Jacksonville in the Atlantic Sun Conference, and then eventually finds his way to Florida State for his senior year under Luke Laux in his first year at Florida State. And I think he definitely put his name out there. I mean, he was definitely a really fun name to watch this year. And if you're not too familiar with his game, he's a pretty crafty, shifty left-handed point guard. I think he's definitely more or less a combo guard at the next level. Don't think he's really the most reliable playmaker at this time, but I will touch on that really in a second. But I think he's a really decent shooter too. Playing at a combo guard, like I said, he has good size at 6'4". I think he will play more off the ball, but he's still going to be able to attack. I think a lot of closeouts, still run a lot of offensive sets at times, being a pretty decent playmaker, has a decent feel. I just don't think this is a guy you're going to want to have the ball in his hands the entire time when he's out on the floor. But we'll just head on the shooting numbers. I don't think 34.8% for his career tells the whole story. I think this is the guy that did shoot a lot of years around that percentage, but off the catch, I think he's going to get a lot of his looks to the next level. I think he'd definitely be a better catch and shoot guy. Maybe in jumping that number up to like 37, maybe even 38%. And I think that's definitely changed his numbers a lot because he's pretty efficient inside the arc too. Like I said, he's not really the most reliable playmaker. He had 311 career turnovers to his 440 career assists. So, like I said, not really the most reliable playmaker, but he did improve a lot this year to where you can see the 6.1 assist number per game this year. But it came on 200 assists to 119 turnovers. So I mean, huge improvement. I mean, what did I say? 311 of his turnovers for a career. So 200 of those really come in the first 3 years. I guess that really shows the improvement this year. Take care of the ball and value the ball a lot more, and that's exactly the kind of traits you're looking for here in a point guard, especially this new age where a lot of these point guards you're expecting to be able to go out and score 15 to 20 points on any given night. I know it's not really going to happen in the NBA, but at any level you want these guys to be able to score. So I think if you mix that in with the ability to now kind of take care of the ball a little bit more, I think that's definitely put his name out there. But he's also like I said, a really powerful downhill scorer. He's really efficient getting to the basket. I think he surprises a lot of people with his right-hand dunks. He comes out of nowhere. This is a left-handed guy, like I said, and he comes down in hill, and especially this year at Florida State, he's put a lot of people on posters where it's not really I guess you can label him as a sneaky athlete. I don't really think he uses a lot of his athleticism throughout a lot of his game. But when he comes downhill, a lot of times he can rise up and, as I said, put some people on the poster. So I think he's a really interesting prospect here. He's comfortable getting downhill. He can get to the basket, finish right, like I said, right or left hand finishes. He's a pretty decent shooter. He can create his own shot. And like I said, he's also been a pretty decent playmaker for his career. I think he definitely does offer some defensive upside too with his lengthy just profile. He creates a little bit of steals here and there with some active hands. Don't think he's really the greatest plus defender, but I wouldn't say he's a slouch either. He's probably a little bit above an average defender. So I think you mix that in with the size and the ability to shoot and a little bit of the playmaking ability. I think this definitely be an interesting prospect for anybody's bench. I mean, we saw the emergence this year of players like Dennis Jenkins. I mean, you never know when your opportunities be called on. So I definitely think this isn't the end of Robert McRae's career. I think there's definitely some opportunity to find a bench spot, especially with the NBA potentially expanding here in a couple of years. But with my next player, we'll have Kentucky star Otega Oweh. And this is a little bit sad for me because this is a guy I watched a lot of his games for the past 2 years as being a Kentucky fan. I'm a big fan of Otega Oweh. I think that his game isn't always the prettiest to watch, but he did it. He got it done. He was a pretty efficient guy for his career while he's at Kentucky. But like I said, he's not the most efficient guy. This is the guy that's there's a straight line to the basket for anybody if you draw any line on any point in the court, and this is the one that Otega Owe is going to take. The name sounds a little familiar. He does have an older brother, Odafe Owe. He's a former defensive end pass rusher for the Ravens. I don't know exactly where he signed. I'm not too big of a football fan. I know he did sign a big contract this offseason, but he does have some football blood in his body, in his genes. You can tell it's the way he plays. He's physical. He likes to get it downhill, like I said. Pushes people out of the way. It feels like just bruiser gets people out of his way. Creates his own path, but I think every team definitely needs that. It kind of has like a little bit of the Lou Dort, I guess, build. Not really to say he plays like him, but he's just that physical, rough guy that's just going to be out there for Kentucky was a lot of the time this year. But he does use that size, too, then also be a disruptor on the defensive end. You can see the steal numbers here, where he hasn't had a year where he averaged less than a steal. Even in his freshman year, where he wasn't playing really the biggest role. This is a guy that's going to blow up a lot of passing lanes. He's going to just take guys off their spot initially, or really just beating him to the spot initially, or just being physical enough to take the ball from him. And he gets a lot of fast break dunks because of it. He gets out in a lot of passing lanes. You can see down there he has 200 career steals, and this is a guy that just is a really defensive playmaker on that side of the floor. And not a lot of guys you can just say they're playmakers on the defensive end, but this is a guy that's going to get you those defensive stops, whether it's in the numbers or just through the eye test. You're gonna feel his defensive presence out there, and I think this is a guy that definitely, in doing so, he can play and guard up to a bigger, I guess, stature than what his 6'4", 220 build really is. I think this is a guy that definitely is comfortable guarding people that are 6'7", 6'8", maybe all the way down to like 6 foot. I think he definitely has a wide range of ability to guard just anybody on the offense and especially out in the wing. Like I said, he has that football blood, so he has really quick feet. He's ability to move his feet and stay with those quicker talents at the smaller guard positions. But then he also has a physical strength, like I said, to then play up and play those 6'8", 6'6" guys where they're not bumping him off his spot and posting him up. And he's just a defensive problem on that end, and I think that's where a lot of his promise is going to initially come from. I mean, you can see the numbers there. He has shot 35% for his career, but I don't really think he's the greatest three-point shooter at this point in time. Not really the greatest looking shot. He has a really bad hitch in his three-point shot. I mean, the picture's not doing it justice, but a lot of it's a straight line, just forcing it, I guess. He's aiming it. He's not really shooting it with touch. As you can see, kind of, a lot of shooters, you want to have that kind of a pocket as you put that ball in your hand so you can kind of feel it come off your fingertips. As you can see, it's straight in his palm. I think that's a coach is instantly going to rework that. And if he's already shooting 35% for his career, that number might be able to jump up to, I mean, no exaggeration, I might be able to jump up to 38% just with fixing how the ball's coming off his hand. So I think that's definitely really interesting to see what he can do. And then this is a guy, like I said, with his physical stature. He likes to get downhill, creates a lot of free throw attempts for himself, and he's just a really interesting player on the offense end. I'll leave this off with, he was all SEC player, or all SEC second team for the past 2 years, and his 2 years at Kentucky. Before Oklahoma initially came into the SEC, I guess. He was the SEC Player of the Year, the preseason Player of the Year coming into this year. But ultimately did not live up to that level of hype. He was the National Basketball Coach All-District first and second team for the past 2 years. Yeah, he's definitely been a guy that has some rep within the college level. This is a guy that he's a very interesting player. I think he definitely could have came out last year, but ultimately does come back for his senior year at Kentucky. I think a lot of respect for Kentucky fans for this player here, because he definitely did not need to come back and ultimately hurt his draft stock, I feel, this year with just a half-built team, it felt like, for a lot of the year. But touching into is also he's a pretty consistent player. He had 26 straight games for 10 plus points to start out his 25-year. Really consistent player. I mean, like I said, it's not the prettiest when he does perform, but he gets it done. And then lastly, like I said, steal numbers. He's fourth this year in the SEC with 1.8. I mean, really disruptive defender, and I think that's going to be his calling card in the NBA. Once he ultimately does get there, I think this is a guy that definitely going to get picked probably the back at the end of the first round, or second round, because he just can't shoot. But man, if somebody can rework his 3-point shot and he becomes that downhill attack defender off of closeouts and just disruptive point attack defender on the defensive end, I think this is a guy that definitely is going to find a home for some type of defense or some type of organization at the next level, and hopefully can have a long, healthy career. I really will be rooting for him. Obviously, I'm a Kentucky fan, but I think somebody's going to get a steal here and take it away. Next, we'll have Tyler Nickel, and this is for everybody that thinks I don't mock any shooters, and I'm only paying attention to the offensive and defensive threats. I mean, here we go. This is a guy that's only going to be really just a spot-up shooter for you. He's the number 75 prospect coming out of high school in the 24/7 recruiting class. He did ultimately go to North Carolina his freshman year. Didn't really play a whole lot. He transfers to Virginia Tech. Gets a little bit bigger of a role, but then obviously you want to get back to a higher level, and I think SEC basketball is definitely one of the higher level of basketballs the past 2 years. So you make that climb, and I think it definitely has been beneficial for him. This is a guy that's shot 40% from three almost for the past 3 years. He's a really good shooter, but that's ultimately really all. That's all he's really going to kind of offer for you at the next level. But every team needs shooting, especially with his size. I think it's 6'7" here, 220. He can be a decent screener off ball. I think a lot of those screens that you're going to see now, especially for a player like him, coming in what people call the Spain or stack option, where he's going to be a lot of off ball to then receive another screen for himself and being a movement rhythm shooter. And I think those are just going to be a lot of looks that are just going to free him up and ultimately make him so he's not just standing there in one spot and being an actual contribution to the offense in some facet. But like I said, he's not really the greatest at creating his own shot. I don't think he's ever really going to create his own shot. It's more or less just a spot up 3-point shot guy at this point in time, and I don't think there's really anything wrong with it. As you can see, he's the second most threes this year in the SEC. He had 110. Ridiculous shooter. He's a really consistent shooter this year, and he kind of reminds me of a guy like Duncan Robinson, where he's a little bit bigger of a 3-point shooter, coming in with a bigger frame, consistent. He likes to hug the 3-point line. This is a guy that I don't really think he has a lot of the one dribbles to stay on the 3-point line, to hug the 3-point line, and not give it up. But those are just things you learn as you're a pro, and I think with this size, you'll definitely be able to learn to create your own 3-point shot with 1 or 2 dribbles, especially if you want to stick in the league. And I think he's definitely he possesses the capabilities to do it. I don't really think he's going to ever be the greatest defender at the next level. I think he's definitely going to get targeted a lot of times at the next level. Just kind of what it is. I think a lot of teams are just going to pick on the white guy, the guy that just out there to shoot threes. But I think threes are better than twos, and if he's out there giving you more of a trade-off in the threes than the twos, I think he's worth it for 8 to 10 minutes off your bench for any team. Especially if some defensive coach can figure out how to hide him in some type of way with zones or problematic defensive wings. I mean, nowadays there should never really be a problem with having a defensive liability out there for their offensive impact, in my opinion. I mean, this is a guy that 73% of his attempts is 650 out of 887 threes. 73% of his threes career attempts in college were just threes. I mean, this guy that got a lot of volume up and was consistent. He shot 40%, like I said. He had 7 games this year with 5+ threes. He's had 2 games this year where he hit 8 threes. I mean, what more could you really want? This is a guy that has good size, is capable of being more than just a spot-up shooter. I feel like a little bit more consistent, good shot diet for your NBA, and that's all you really can want. I think this guy is going to definitely go undrafted. Maybe he gets a two-way, then maybe in a few years you hear him in the playoffs for probably the Miami Heat. You never know. I think this definitely isn't the end of Tyler Nickel. I think this is definitely going to be a guy that we'll be hearing from, probably from somewhere like the Miami Heat, like I said, in a few years in the playoffs. Next year we'll have Mark Mitchell, and this is another guy that is a little bit more highly touted coming out of high school. He's a number 28 recruit in ESPN in that 22 high school class. He ultimately was a McDonald's All-American down there, you can see too. He's a pretty decorated college athlete as when it's all said and done now that his career is over. Started in pretty much every single game, as you can see there. He's, I think one game he came off the bench for senior night before he's at Duke his sophomore year. A lot of respect for his name, obviously, to put him in the starting lineup as a freshman and then start him all the way through his career. I mean, this is a guy that I think definitely has developed a lot in his 4 years now, coming in being somewhat of a playmaker for the senior year, I guess you'd say. As I said, he's come in from Duke. He's now spent these past 2 years at Missouri, and I think the senior year, you can definitely see it in the 3.6 assist numbers there. He became a lot better of a threat as a playmaker this year. He had 119 assists this year and only 69 turnovers, so almost a 2-to-1 assist-to-turnover ratio, I guess, if you want to round up by 20, but he had a pretty good year this year. I mean, this is a guy that's coming in 6'9", maybe a little bit taller, pretty lengthy. But he's going to give you the ability to play your 5-out offense. It's going to be very comfortable putting it on the floor and attacking people from the three-point line, the mid-range, the area, around the free throw line, the short corner. He's going to be really comfortable just putting the ball on the floor. And I think nowadays, with today's offense, this is a guy that's going to open up your offense a lot more, where he's still going to be able to come down, have that lengthy frame, as I said, be able to guard your bigger guys on the defensive end, and then still be able to open up your offense for a lot of guys, get backdoor cuts, some three-point shots coming off of movement screens, and I think this guy's just going to ultimately just not be a cone. I think that's a big mantra for myself. I think you need to be able to create for anybody from any position. I think passing is such an underlooked aspect of any level of basketball, and I think if you can get good playmaking from any position on the floor, you're just never going to have you're always going to have options of anybody being able to have the night, or a night where you outperform your numbers, I feel like. And I think Mark Mitchell's a guy that's definitely going to open up a lot of room for not only himself, but a lot of other people here. Like I said, he's very comfortable attacking off the dribble. This year, he's definitely started to open up his game a little bit more. He's a lot better of a three-point shooter. I know the numbers there only are saying 32%, but not really on the highest volume either. But this year, he shot 49 threes. He only made 19 of them, but that does translate to almost 39%, 38.8%. So, I mean, in low volume, he's only shooting about 1.5 a game, but he can be a decent three-point shooter. And I think if some team definitely can go back, I think this is another guy that could take it away. He has a little bit of a hitch in his jump shot. It's slow setting up. He's a lefty, so that throws off a lot of teams too. But slow developing, a little bit of a hitch. He needs to get his elbow tucked in a little bit more, but once you can fix that, I think that it definitely can unlock a little bit more of his shooting ability. And once you tie that in with the playmaking ability and be able to put the ball on the floor, I think this definitely unlocks all levels of his game. And I think the sky's the limit with a guy that can dribble, shoot it, and pass it at the next level. And then lastly, to tie that all in, I guess we'll go over some of his accolades. He was all SEC team this year, and then he was all third SEC team last year. But the free throw attempts this year is what really screams out to me this year. 8.1 attempts leads the SEC. He gets the free throw line like nobody else. I don't think I've ever seen somebody finish as many and ones as what Mark Mitchell does. He has a really great sense of just being able to finish through contact and get the ball up on the basket and on the rim and just finish through a lot of contact. Draws a lot of fouls, as I said. 8 attempts to the free throw line is ridiculous at any level. But coming from a power forward who's not playing back to the basket 90% of the time, and that's ridiculous. Like I said, a lot of his playmaking is coming out of the isolation. A lot of these fouls are coming from him taking somebody off the dribble and attacking the basket, and him just getting fouled. I mean, it's really cool to watch him play, I think, and develop in these past 4 years. And last, I'll leave it off. With doing that too, he's not really the craziest athlete. A lot of his scoring ability is going to come through pump fakes, spin moves, just good footwork. And I think this is a guy, like I said, just has high IQ. He can dribble it, shoot it. I think he definitely has the ability to learn to shoot it. Yeah, he's shown the ability to be a decent playmaker this year. I mean, I think this is a guy that you can get him on a low value. I have him written down here with a comparison of Trendon Watford and a Jared Vanderbilt body. So do with that if you will. Not really the biggest names, but I do think some coach is going to find a spot for Mark Mitchell in their roster, and he's going to make some decent role for whatever franchise that ultimately decides to be. And lastly, we'll leave this off of Michael Hand-Glockton. Not really the biggest name popping out. As you can see, it's another guy that was unranked coming out of high school. I love these prospects where everybody's kind of wrote them off after high school, and then you hear about them years later. And I think this is another guy just like that. Not really the most flashy accolades here in college. One of his biggest things were winning a national championship and being a huge contribution off the bench last year for that team. He's just a big body coming in at 7'1", 260. Pretty decent mobility, too. Can move his feet a little bit. I'm not saying he's going to go out and guard anybody on the perimeter, but around the rim, he has some decent instincts. He has some definitely great feel, 2 block shots, change shots, coming in double team, just be a presence down low. And off the bench, this is all you're really going to want. You're going to want your big bodies, your bruisers. Some of it's just going to go in and be physical for 8 minutes, and that's really what I think you're going to get here in Hand-Glockton. I think he's a pretty decent screener. Nowadays, where a lot of basketball's coming in the isolation pick-and-roll game, it's exactly what you're going to want here. He's a decent lob threat. He just has good size, decent length and arms. He's comfortable rolling to the basket and just going up and catching lobs. He's comfortable finishing under the basket. I think he has definitely a good feel finishing around the basket. He hasn't shot the ball a whole lot, but, almost 65% from the career shooting percentage, I think, reflects the ability to be a decent finisher around the basket. Playing for Florida, that's a team that definitely likes to get up and go. Somebody scores on them, they might be scoring on the other end in 5 seconds, and in doing so, I think that definitely teaches your big man to run the floor really well. With even the ball goes into the hoop, you got to just go and take off. And with that NBA level game where it's a lot faster, the shot clock's a lot faster, your possessions are a lot shorter, especially with some of those teams getting up and down. I think he definitely has the good mobility to be able to keep up in the next level. Like I said, this guy runs the floor pretty well. He has pretty decent mobility around the basket, and I think that's all you're really going to want here for someone that's 7'1". Like I said, he has some pretty decent instincts around the rim. But I think the big thing here is, you can see the numbers where his freshman year before he did ultimately transfer to the SEC, playing in the Sun Belt. His freshman year, he was newcomer of the year. He was third team all Sun Belt that year too. And he was 11th in blocks and 16th in rebounds. So he's a guy that filled it up at a young age and then ultimately decided to come in and sacrifice his own stats to win what ultimately was a national championship in 2025. He's a really good offensive rebounder. Almost half of his rebounds came on the offensive end. So that's just showing you just working and creating extra possessions for yourself and or others. Because this guy that's very comfortable kicking the ball back out too. Playing in Florida under the Todd Golden offense, everybody just has a decent IQ, a high feel, so he's comfortable kicking the ball out and creating three-point shots for others. He's capable of hitting the backdoor cutters when he's out in the three-point line, and I do think that Todd Golden definitely didn't let him shoot the three-point shot because, as you can see, he's a 44% free throw shooter. But I definitely do think he's a decent form to expand that three-point shot the next level, and we'll see. We've seen guys like What's his name? Castleton, Colin Castleton from Florida a few years ago. Funny enough, we've seen him start to expand his game, a 3-point shot. Saw Jay Huff to start to do it, and maybe this is a guy that can expand his 3-point level at the next level, maybe in a few years. But I think he's still a pretty decent prospect without it. But leaving it off of that, thanks again for watching. I've had a lot of fun creating these videos, getting to touch on a lot of these lesser named prospects, a lot of these lesser named talents. But it's been fun to kind of put those names out there before ultimately in a few years they might become some names that are playing on some teams that you're rooting for or not, or rooting against. So it's been pretty fun. And that's all I'll say, at least. If you like hearing what you see here, I have videos coming out on Instagram and TikTok in shortened down versions. I also run the Boxing One podcast on Spotify. Be sure to tune in there if you're interested in anything that I'm saying here. But once again, thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.